At 11:38 a.m., January 28, 1986, Challenger was cleared to fly. 7 people climbed into a spacecraft that some engineers feared was unsafe. The danger was not a mystery hidden deep inside the machine. It had been discussed the night before, plainly and repeatedly. In Utah, engineers sat around a speakerphone with charts and cold data. At Kennedy Space Center, the launch pad was already covered in ice. The argument was simple. The shuttle should not launch in that cold. The answer from management was just as simple. Launch anyway. For 73 seconds, the system treated a warning like an inconvenience. This is the night they knew, and the morning nobody listened. By 1986, the Space Shuttle was sold as routine transportation. NASA needed the public to see it as a dependable space truck. Congress had heard promises of cheap, frequent access to orbit. The shuttle would launch, land, refuel, and fly again. That promise sounded clean, modern, and almost ordinary. Inside NASA, the reality was much more fragile. Every flight depended on thousands of delicate systems working together perfectly. Many of those systems had not flown enough to earn real trust. 2 enormous white rockets were strapped beside the orbiter. They were called solid rocket boosters, and they did the heavy lifting. Each booster was built from separate steel segments. Those segments were shipped by rail from a factory in Utah. At the launch site, the pieces were bolted together vertically. Between the segments sat a rubber seal called an O-ring. It was small compared with the scale of the vehicle. Its job was brutally important during the first moments of launch. The O-ring had to block 5,000-degree gas from escaping sideways. If it sealed quickly, the booster stayed intact. If it failed, fire could reach places fire was never meant to go. Nothing about the part looked heroic or glamorous. It looked like a simple black ring on a workbench. But in engineering, simple parts can carry impossible responsibility. For more than a year, Morton Thiokol engineers saw troubling evidence. Recovered boosters showed erosion and blow-by near the O-ring joints. Hot gas had already escaped farther than it should have. The pattern became more alarming when temperatures were lower. Cold rubber did not flex back into place quickly enough. That delay was exactly what the seal could not afford. Roger Boisjoli understood the pattern and wrote it down. He warned that ignoring the problem could destroy a flight. His memo used words no engineer writes casually. He called the possible result a catastrophe of the highest order. He also wrote that human life could be lost. The warning entered the paperwork, but the design didn't change. The shuttle kept flying, and the pressure kept building. By late January, Challenger had already been delayed several times. The mission carried more than satellites and experiments. It carried a national education campaign and a teacher named Krista McAuliffe. Millions of children were being prepared to watch history live. Worse, NASA wanted this launch to feel inspiring, normal, and inevitable. The weather refused to cooperate with that story. On January 27th, the forecast became impossible to ignore. The next morning could be near 18 degrees Fahrenheit. No shuttle had ever launched in temperatures remotely that low. The coldest previous launch had been 53 degrees. Even after that warmer launch, inspectors found O-ring damage. To the engineers, the conclusion was not dramatic. It was just the result the data pointed toward. Do not launch below 53 degrees. That night, a teleconference connected Thiokol in Utah with NASA managers. The call also included Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama. Boisjoli and Arnie Thompson presented the evidence carefully. They showed charts from earlier flights and highlighted the cold weather damage. Their recommendation was clear, direct, and professionally uncomfortable. They said Challenger should not fly the next morning. On the NASA side, the reaction was immediate resistance. One manager reportedly said he was appalled by the recommendation. The launch had slipped before and the schedule pressure was enormous. But pressure does not warm rubber, and pressure does not change data. The engineers kept pointing back to the same evidence. The O-rings had never been proven safe in that cold. For a moment, Thiokol's official position matched its engineers' warning. Then, Thiokol management asked for a private break. The engineers were moved out of the center of the decision. The planned 5 minutes stretched into roughly 30. In the side room, managers reframed the question. They were no longer asking whether the launch was proven safe. They were asking whether the engineers could prove it would fail. That was a dangerous reversal of responsibility. The data had not changed during the break. The temperature forecast had not changed during the break. Only the decision process had changed. When Thiokol returned to the call, management reversed the recommendation. The company now supported launching Challenger. Boisjoli listened as the warning lost its authority. He had data, experience, and written evidence. He did not have the power to stop the launch. He went home believing the shuttle should not fly. Other people had seen the same evidence and approved the risk. The next morning was bright, clear, and brutally cold. Ice hung from the launch tower like a warning made visible. At launch time, the temperature was about 36 degrees. That was 17 degrees colder than any shuttle had ever flown. The crew arrived in orange flight suits and practiced calm. Dick Scobie commanded the mission. Michael Smith sat beside him as pilot. Judith Resnick, Ellison Onizuka, and Ronald McNair served as mission specialists. Gregory Jarvis flew as a payload specialist. Krista McAuliffe flew as the first ordinary citizen selected for space. Her presence made the mission feel personal to classrooms everywhere. Across America, teachers rolled televisions into rooms of waiting children. Students watched because this launch was supposed to belong to them. NASA had promised that space could enter an ordinary classroom. At 11:38 a.m., the engines came alive. Cotton white vapor and real fire swallowed the base of the stack. Challenger lifted away from the pad. For the first seconds, the launch looked exactly like success. The shuttle climbed into a clean, blue Florida sky. But the right booster had already begun telling another story. A puff of dark smoke escaped from a field joint. It came from the kind of seam the engineers had warned about. Cold stiffened rubber had not sealed quickly enough. As the vehicle accelerated, forces on the stack increased. For nearly a minute, the damage stayed hidden from public understanding. Then aerodynamic pressure and flame found the weakness. At 73 seconds, fire breached the external tank. The vehicle broke apart high above the Atlantic. The image was terrible, but it was not shown as gore. It became two white trails branching across a pale sky. For a long moment, many viewers did not understand what they saw. In mission control, the room froze into procedure. The controller's voice stayed flat because training demanded steadiness. He said there had obviously been a major malfunction. In classrooms, children watched teachers search for words. In living rooms, families stared at the sky on television. All 7 crew members were lost. The country needed an explanation, and the evidence pointed backward. A presidential commission was formed to investigate the disaster. It included astronauts, test pilots, officials, and Richard Feynman. During a televised hearing, he used a simple demonstration. He took a sample of O-ring material. He clamped it, then placed it into a glass of ice water. The image was small enough for anyone to understand. After a few seconds, he removed the chilled rubber. When he released the clamp, the rubber stayed bent. It did not spring back the way a seal needed to. The demonstration cut through pages of institutional explanation. The final report confirmed the engineer's central warning. The O-rings were not designed or tested for that cold. The report also found a deeper organizational failure. NASA's culture made it too easy to overrule uncomfortable data. The problem was not only a piece of rubber. It was a room where warnings became obstacles. Boisjoli testified honestly before the commission. He provided memos, timelines, and his account of the final call. His honesty cost him professionally inside the industry. For the rest of his life, he spoke about engineering ethics. He warned students that data alone is not enough. Someone must keep insisting when the room wants silence. The shuttle program was grounded for nearly 3 years. The booster joints were redesigned before flights resumed. NASA also changed its launch decision process on paper. Those changes mattered, but they could not recover the crew. 73 seconds is shorter than most ordinary conversations. It is shorter than many advertisements people skip without thinking. But the warning came many hours before launch. It came through charts, memos, phone calls, and human fear. The failure was not unpredictable, and it was not unnamed. It was known by people whose job was to know it. Challenger left behind more than a redesigned rocket joint. It left a question for every technical room after it. When you know something the room rejects, do you say it again? And if nobody listens, do you find another way to be heard?